All right, so today we are taking a deep dive into something that on the surface might seem pretty straightforward. Herpangina. That thing we usually think of as a childhood illness.
Exactly.
But as with so many things we think we know, there's often a lot more going on beneath the surface. And, you seem like the kind of person who likes to really get into the nitty-gritty, so.
Loves to dig a little deeper.
Exactly. So let's unpack this. When we say herpangina, paint me a picture. What are we actually talking about here?
Well, imagine this. You've got these tiny little blisters, almost like miniature ulcers, erupting on the soft palate, the back of the throat.
Ouch. Okay, so not a fun feeling. And I'm guessing that's where the whole sore throat thing comes in.
You got it. It's all thanks to this group of viruses called enteroviruses.
Enteroviruses. Okay, so are we talking like one specific virus or
Actually, there are 22 different types that can cause herpangina.
22? Okay, so a whole team of troublemakers. And how do these enteroviruses, how are they typically spread? How do people come into contact with them?
Well, let's just say they're not very picky about their mode of transportation. We're talking fecal matter, respiratory droplets.
Okay, so definitely not something you want to pick up at a picnic, right? But I think what a lot of us are probably thinking right now is, wait a minute, isn't this a kid's thing?
Right, you think scraped knees, playgrounds.
Exactly. But it turns out adults can get it too.
Absolutely. It's statistically less common in adults, but we can definitely still get it and spread it. In fact, it's been documented in adolescents and even young adults.
So just because we traded in the jungle gym for the office cubicle doesn't mean we're home free?
Not at all. And think about all the places adults are workplaces, social events, public transportation. We could be carriers without even realizing it.
Right. And potentially exposing others who might be more vulnerable, right? Like newborns, pregnant women, anyone with a weaker immune system.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to be aware of the symptoms and take precautions.
Okay, so let's talk about those symptoms. We know about the sore throat, but what else are we looking at?
Well, the usual suspects are fever, those painful mouth sores.
Yeah, those don't sound pleasant.
Not at all. And often a decreased appetite. I mean, who wants to eat when your throat feels like that, right?
Mashed potatoes only, I get it.
Exactly. But it can actually go beyond that. Some adults experience headaches, neck pain, even back pain.
Wow, okay, so this isn't just a little tickle in the throat. It can really knock you down.
It can. And in some cases, particularly with young children, seizures can even occur.
Hold on, seizures. Okay, that just took a turn I wasn't expecting.
It did, didn't it?
Yeah.
And it highlights why it's so crucial to take this seriously and not just brush it off as a simple sore throat.
So we're talking about a range of symptoms that could easily be mistaken for something else.
Absolutely. And because adults often aren't used to experiencing these kinds of symptoms, they might not even think twice about them. But it's important to be aware of the potential complications. Dehydration, for example, can become a real concern.
Right, because those sores make it so painful to swallow anything.
Exactly. And then there's the risk of those more severe complications we mentioned, like brainstem encephalitis.
Brainstem encephalitis. Okay, now that one sounds pretty serious. What exactly is that?
So it's a very serious inflammation of the brain and spinal cord. And it can be a rare complication, particularly with a specific type of enterovirus called EV71.
Okay, encephalitis. You definitely don't want to mess with that. So how do we prevent this whole herpangina situation from escalating? I'm guessing hand washing is still at the top of the list.
Absolutely. It's like the superhero of hygiene for a reason. Remember those not-so-glamorous transmission methods we talked about? Thorough hand washing helps stop the spread right in its tracks.
Right, no one wants to be that person spreading those enteroviruses around. So good hand hygiene check. What else?
Staying home when you're under the weather is crucial, even if you just think it's a mild cold. Adults tend to power through, but it's a public health responsibility to break that cycle.
Okay, I'm getting the message. Wash those hands. Stay home when you're feeling icky. It's about protecting ourselves and those around us, especially with those potential complications you mentioned. But what happens if, despite our best efforts, herpangina still crashes the party? What can we do to manage the symptoms and make ourselves feel a little less miserable?
I'm glad you asked. Even though there's no magic pill for viruses, there are definitely ways to ease the discomfort. Hydration is key, and I'm not just talking about your usual 8 glasses a day.
Bring on the hydration strategies, because let's be real, who wants to guzzle plain water when they've got a sore throat?
Exactly. Think ice pops, cold smoothies, even just ice chips. Anything to keep those fluids up, especially since those mouth sores can make swallowing a challenge.
Okay, noted. Cold and soothing it is. But what about food? Am I stuck with bland broth and gelatin for days?
I won't lie. Sticking to bland foods initially is your best bet.
So, farewell to my spicy ramen dreams for a while.
For now, yes. But bland doesn't have to be boring. Think creamy soups, mashed sweet potatoes, applesauce. There's room for flavor within the realm of easy-on-the-throat cuisine.
Okay, that actually sounds somewhat doable, but I have to ask, what about pain relief? Because sometimes those sore throats feel like I'm swallowing glass shards.
Over-the-counter pain relievers like ibuprofen or acetaminophen can be your best friend in those moments. And believe it or not, gargling with warm salt water can be surprisingly soothing.
Interesting. Simple, but sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. Anything else we should keep in our Herpangina toolkit?
Don't underestimate the power of rest. I know it's not always easy for us busy adults, but sometimes your body just needs you to hit the pause button and let it do its thing.
Permission to binge watch my favorite shows guilt-free. I'll take it. So we've covered prevention, symptoms, treatment, anything else our listeners should be aware of when it comes to this surprisingly complex virus.
While researching this episode, I came across some studies about the impact of herpangina on pregnancy. It really got me thinking about the bigger picture here.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that. What did these studies find? So last time we were talking about herpangina, and you mentioned some research about its impact during pregnancy. What's the connection there?
Well, there's a growing body of research that suggests that herpangina, especially when it's caused by certain strains of enterovirus, can potentially lead to complications for both the expectant mother and the developing baby.
Okay, that makes sense, right? We've already talked about how even what we think of as kind of mild illnesses can have these ripple effects, and obviously during pregnancy, those ripples could be even more significant.
Absolutely.
So what kind of complications are we talking about specifically?
Some studies have shown a possible link between herpangina during pregnancy and things like preterm labor or low birth weight.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and there's even some concern about potential neurological effects on the baby, although I will say that more research is definitely needed in that area.
Yeah, that's definitely not something to take lightly. And it really underscores the point that we're not just talking about a sore throat or a few days of feeling under the weather here.
Yeah.
This is serious stuff.
Right. And, it kind of circles back to what we were discussing earlier about public health, right? If even a common illness like herpangina, which, let's face it, most people probably don't even think twice about, can have these implications for pregnant women and their babies, it makes you wonder, are we doing enough to really educate and protect vulnerable populations?
It really does. I mean, we've been talking about individual responsibility, right? Like washing our hands, staying home when we're sick, all that good stuff. But this adds a whole other layer to the conversation.
It does.
It's bigger than just,
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that our individual actions have these wider consequences, and that creating a truly healthier society involves more than just our personal choices, right? It also requires systemic changes, access to good healthcare, reliable information, and support systems that give everyone the power to make informed decisions about their health and the health of their families.
Right. So it's about connecting the dots between our personal responsibility and these larger public health initiatives, recognizing that we're all part of this kind of interconnected system, and what impacts one of us ultimately impacts all of us, right?
Perfectly said. And that's really the thought that I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive. I mean, herpangina, on the surface, it might seem like a relatively minor illness, but as we've seen, there's a surprising amount of complexity there.
Yeah, for sure. It's been eye-opening, to say the least. I definitely have a whole new perspective on this common illness that I think a lot of us probably take for granted.
Absolutely.
So, big thanks to you, as always, for walking us through this. I always learned so much from you.
Always a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you, of course, for sending in this topic. It just goes to show, there's always something new to discover, even in the most unexpected places.
I love it.
So remember, knowledge is power, right? And now you're armed with all the information you need to navigate the world of herpangina, everything from those pesky symptoms to its wider public health implications. So until next time, stay curious, and hey, maybe keep those ice pops handy just in case.